Now, let's go on. Let's move on. I want to talk about one guy. I want to talk about one guy called Erik Erikson. In the field of developmental psychology, which is really the basis for everything that we're learning this semester, the names that primarily stand out are Piaget, Vygotsky, both of whom we've discussed before. Both of them are especially known for their work in the childhood years. And then we have Erik Erikson. If you remember, we talked about Piaget. Piaget was trying to understand the mind, while Vygotsky was trying to maximize the mind. Erikson is not so much about the mind. Erik Erikson is more about social growth, social development. Erik Erikson has a very unique story. Erikson was born and raised in Germany, but because of his Jewish ancestry, when Nazi Germany was growing, the family moved to Italy. So through his adolescent years, he lived in Italy. And as he got older, he was very interested in psychology and decided to move to the center of psychology in Europe, which at the time was Austria. Studied in psychology, became a great student of Anna Freud, the daughter of Sigmund Freud. And he was trained in the field of psychoanalysis. If you remember, the field of psychoanalysis primarily is concerned about the unconsciousness and how what happens in the past predetermines or at least strongly affects who you're going to be in the future. And that's the main interest of Erikson. As he got older, he met an American, married, came to live to the US. In 4 different stages of his life, he lived in 4 different cultures. So what about Erikson? See, the thing about Erikson is that he was interested in social growth, and his work is especially recognized through the adolescent years. As far as social growth, he would, similar to the European model of growth, believe that everything grows in stages. So there's a stage and a stage and a stage. In the adolescent years, he thought that humans had a social stage, a social crisis, so to speak. And he called this one identity versus confusion. Identity is the most famous area of work of Erikson. Erikson noted that adolescents seem to have a struggle, which is very natural, a struggle trying to find an identity. If you have already gone through your adolescent years, you may have already passed through it. You may have already gone over it. If you're right now in the adolescent years, you may be living somewhat in the middle of it. As there's so many changes in your life as an adolescent, there are body changes, there are mental changes, there are social changes. When you start to change to high school, the environment changes, now there's peer pressure, there's all these different changes that are going on happening simultaneously. It's normal for an adolescent to feel somewhat lost, somewhat confused. And this is what Erikson noted. Erikson traveled, not only lived in different cultures, but he also traveled a lot. He noted that across different cultures, there seems to be a consistent social need. Trying to find an identity. So, Erikson noted that within the adolescent years, it's important to try to find a sense of uniqueness, a sense of overall, getting to know yourself. That's hence identity. Erikson would note that adolescents may have a struggle, and this struggle might be reflected in perhaps, say, confusion about gender, confusion about religion, confusion about vocations, different. I remember as an adolescent, I had a couple crises of identity. One of them was my little stage when I wanted to be a rock star. I was so much into music. I idolized musicians, especially rock musicians, and I thought that I wanted to be like that. Have you heard of this musician called Carlos Santana? Carlos Santana. He was my biggest idol because not only did he play guitar, he was Mexican. And his first name is Carlos, so I'm thinking Carlos Santana, this is gonna be me, Carlos Vargas, you know? But as I got older, tried music for a little bit, realized that it wasn't my thing, and I left it. When I got a little bit older, I was super interested into sports. So now my idols shifted to athletes. And now my new thing was about trying to be an athlete. And my change was reflected in the way that I dressed. I dressed differently, cut my hair differently from having somewhat of a long hair to now cut it almost entirely bald. The group of people with whom I would hang out would make such a difference in my identity for who I was trying to be. That's all normal. That's all very normal. It's best, according to Erikson, to try to find a sense of identity as an adolescent than it is to try to find it as an adult. Remember, psychoanalysis is concerned for what happens in the past influencing the future. So, according to the theory, if you don't have a strong sense of identity as an adolescent, you may grow somewhat confused, move into your adulthood years and realize that it's not what you wanted. And you may see the adults experiencing a little bit of what we may call the midlife crisis, where they're trying to become young again, trying to fit with a different time, trying to fit in a different group of people. I'll never forget this time that we were in Miami, a friend of mine and myself, and we're at a bar on a roof, and we see this elder man, very, very elder, driving a sports car with a very young woman hanging right next to him. And it was kind of odd to see this man seeking so much social approval, so much social attention. Not really something that you see in elders. This man was obviously displaying a lot of traits for what is an identity crisis. And you may see this reflected everywhere. You may see adults that cling on their children because who they are totally belongs to what they think of their children. You may see adults who lose their sense of individuality and they just become their job. So they're no longer with a first name and a last name, but instead of using their first name, it's almost like their title becomes their first name. So instead of me being Carlos Vargas, I'm Professor Vargas. And everybody has to call me professor because that's my identity now. That's sort of the crisis that Erikson starts to describe. What happens if one day I lose my title as a professor? When somebody loses their title, their job, they get so lost that they, even some people end up losing their will to live. Relationships, what happens to people that have no sense of individuality and they just become the relationship partner? When that partner leaves, or if that partner leaves, this person is totally lost because this person never developed an identity. What happens in the past strongly affects or predetermines who you become in the future. Big lesson from Erikson. The adolescent years are the best years to find an identity. If you see an adolescent feeling somewhat confused, don't mock it. Don't laugh at it. It's normal. And you know what? It actually should be encouraged. Encourage the adolescent to try to find a sense of identity so they become strong in their sense of individuality. In this way they have a good idea for who they will be.